Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. I'm here today on the What Fuels You podcast with Amy Nelson, the founder and CEO of the Riveter, a co-working space built by women for everyone that now has 5 locations. Amy started her career in law and politics before pivoting to become an entrepreneur, which was heavily driven by the challenges she personally saw that women were facing in working environments, geared mostly towards men. She is a force and inspiration in every single way. She's a mother of 3 and an amazing figure in our Seattle community and beyond. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks so much, Shauna. It's
You're
great to be here.
So we're going to start with rapid fire.
All right.
Okay. Favorite podcast?
Cereal.
Okay. Facebook or Instagram?
Instagram.
Spinning or yoga?
Spinning all the way.
Hardest decision that you've ever made?
The hardest decision I ever made was to move to Seattle.
Favorite movie?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, I love that movie. Dream getaway spot?
Zihuatanejo, Mexico.
If you could have any guest visit you at the Riveter, who would it be?
Michelle Obama.
Oh, you're going to make that happen. I want inside tickets to that. Seriously.
We'll make it happen.
What would people be surprised to learn about you?
I think people would be surprised to learn that I love to cook.
Oh, that is surprising.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm trying hard to become a cook. It's a challenge.
Like whether I do it all the time is
Does
one
Carl
thing, but
cook?
I love to do it. Oh, Carl's an amazing cook.
Yeah.
He just makes like steak
Meat,
and
potatoes. Yeah.
So I make all the other stuff.
It's time to do more spinning, right? When
Yep.
you got that. Okay, so this is super fun. I'm psyched to have you. I know that everybody, at least in Seattle, knows your name, knows a lot about you and what you're building, the movement that you're building. And as a woman, thank you.
Yeah. Well, you've done it too. I mean, you
you.
have built the path before me.
Thank you. No, we're just super grateful. And when I first met you, I don't think I realized that that's like the level that you were going to go to. And then it was like, is Amy triplets? Like she's everywhere. Like, how is she here and there and at home and on the road and nursing? I've just been kind of in awe. So I wanted to kind of take you back, more importantly, to kind of the early days of you as a little girl, because I'm meeting you as this force, but my guess is that you've always been this person.
I've always had a lot of energy, and I've always been really curious about the world. I think those two things are true.
And so did that come from, like, tell me about your family. I know you have a sister, and I've met your mom.
I have an older sister who is also an attorney, and she lives in San Francisco with her husband, who's a pediatric cardiologist, and they have 2 little kids.
Okay.
I am 2.5 years younger than my sister, and I am very much the younger sister in the sibling pair.
I am the same with my brother.
And then my mother was a public school teacher for 36 years, who got her master's when I was in college. And my father is a former attorney and now a small business owner.
And so describe how did you grow up? You grew up in a suburb, a city? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, called Upper Arlington, which is where my parents grew up. I grew up with all of my grandparents, and I grew up with almost all of my 22 first cousins.
Oh my gosh.
Nearby. Yep.
22 first cousins. Is it Italian?
Or Catholic.
Catholic.
Irish Catholic.
Irish Catholic.
Yeah.
Okay. My husband is 27 and I've got like 6. And I'm like, that's a lot.
It's a lot. It was amazing. I had one sibling, my sister, and she's my best friend, but it was amazing to grow up with this enormous extended family. So I always felt very surrounded.
And are they still there?
Yes.
So are they like, what are you doing in Seattle? They think it's like Alaska?
Well, I have one cousin she's also a lawyer, and she lives in San Diego. But I think all the rest of them live in Columbus, Ohio.
Wow.
I know. I still have cousins who are in middle school, though. I mean,
and you grew up, did you go to private school, public school?
I went to public school.
Okay.
Same high school my parents went to. Most of my closest friends are friends I've known since I was 5 or 6.
Still to this day.
Still to this day.
And how did you have a most likely to blank?
I did.
What were you?
I was most likely to succeed.
So was I. Actually, mine was most likely to become an unemployed millionaire, and so I didn't know if that meant like.
I think that means succeed. I think like the unemployment
eventually
part comes after. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really funny.
Let's go with that conclusion.
I'm going to go with that one. And so, do you have a clear understanding of kind of what your family values were growing up, or has it been morphing over time?
It's actually, I mean, I think about it a lot because I have 3 little girls who are 4, 2, and 1. And so I think about...
That's another story for later in the podcast.
But I mean, I think about all the time, you know, I think my parents did an incredible job with me and my sister. And I think about what they did because I want to replicate what they did. And I think a huge part of it was they just gave us lots of love and lots of time to play. But then when we wanted to do something, when we wanted to try something, if we signed up, we had to finish it. We had to follow through. We were not allowed to quit midway. And that was like, and I remember I was in 7th grade, I think, and I'd been playing tennis for a number of years. And my sister is an excellent tennis player. I mean, my sister is an All-American college tennis player. And it was around 7th grade that I realized I was never going to be an All-American college tennis player. And also all of my best friends were playing tennis, my sister. And I didn't want to do it. I was a swimmer.
Did you know that I played college tennis?
I didn't know.
Oh.
But
I probably know your sister, although you guys are younger than me.
Well, I was a swimmer and a water polo player. And it was around that time I decided that's what I wanted to do. And so once I made that decision, you know, it was midway through like the winter tennis season. And I promptly told my parents, I was like, I've made my life decision here. I'm ready to quit. And they're like,
that's not happening.
That's not happening. You're going to have to finish this out.
That's a challenge as a parent. And you had a strong female figure in a mother.
I did. And I had a father who was an equal co-parent, which I think is equally as important.
Oh, yeah. It's huge.
And, you know, my sister and I never thought there was a difference to having sons and daughters when I was little. And I think that's something that we as a society need to think really hard about, right? What we teach our girls to do, what we teach our boys to do. And I was taught to take risks and be brave, that it's okay to fail, be loud, right? And these are things
take up space.
Take up space. And these are things I definitely struggled with in my middle school years.
Yeah. Well, there's all studies around that. And I have a middle schooler and all the camouflaging that happens around that age. And
it's crazy.
Not wanting to stand out or be too smart or too loud. Yeah. No,
and then I think eventually I realized, like, I am smart. I like being smart. It's a positive.
And it's cool to be smart.
Yeah, it's cool to be smart. And I think that was, you know, my friends that I grew up with, the girls, you know, like 3 of us were in the top 15 in our high school class. Like, that was cool.
Yeah.
Like, we were proud of that. And I think that was good.
I love it. It's hard today. That's a whole other subject, is the parenting thing. But so you went on to go to Emory, and how did you choose Emory?
I mean, honestly, my older sister went there.
And so you were like, I want to be close to her.
Well, it was interesting. My parents got divorced while I was in high school. And it was, you know, it was a hard period of life.
How old were you?
16.
Oh,
17.
Gosh. I'm sorry. I didn't know that.
Well, they're together now. It's fascinating.
Wait,
yeah.
Okay, that's a whole
other, yeah.
Wait, they're together?
Yeah.
They are married again.
I don't. They're not married again, but they never dated other people. They were high school sweethearts.
Oh,
yeah. It's really fascinating. But anyway, I wanted to, you know, my sister and I went through it differently because she was away at college when it happened. And so it was really kind of grounding for me to go and be in the same place as her. Also, I mean, I love her. And Emory was a great school. I wanted to study political science. And Jimmy Carter is attached to the school with his Carter Center, which works on democracy and freedom of information and health around the world. And so I ended up going to work for him, which was amazing.
That. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Carter or Obama?
I think they're both incredible. They're both incredible people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an amazing experience that you had, like that foundation at that young age.
I was fortunate. But
That's
also,
huge.
like, I've realized too, like, as I've, you know, over the past 20 years, I was lucky, but I'm a really hard worker. And so much of that is like, if you've got that hustle when you're young, you can spin that into a million different directions. And I think the Carter Center was amazing because I found out very quickly when I joined as an intern that if you worked hard, if you took initiative, if you went the extra mile, then all the doors would open for you. And so I ended up working there full time and had these incredible experiences. I always figure that you want to take the most out of any position you're in, learn the most, connect with the most people. And the Carter Center taught me to do that. Right. They taught me about the power of a network and the power of connection.
Yeah. We've done a great job of it. It's awesome. And so you went on to Emory, and then I also know that you studied Spanish. Were you wanting to do something in international affairs, or how did you want to, or is Spanish just like a passion?
No, I mean, oh my gosh, honestly, I'm terrible at languages. Spanish was so hard.
I regret not learning Spanish.
But but I wanted to study abroad in South America.
And
so
did you do that?
I did. I studied abroad in Buenos Aires, which I loved. I found Latin American politics and culture to be just endlessly fascinating. And that was how I ended up then interning at the Carter Center. But yeah, I was always very fascinated from a young age at kind of the global view of things and what was happening in the world. I mean, my mom has a poem saved from when I was like 8 or 9 about the famine in Ethiopia because it just like really affected me. Seeing pictures of starving little kids when I was a little kid. I couldn't comprehend how something like that could happen in the world.
I remember in 8th grade discovering that for the first time and freaking out about
like
it.
Why we couldn't fix it? Why we weren't fixing it?
And that we still haven't fixed it.
And we still haven't, and that there are starving children in America. I mean, all of these. And so I always wanted to work in kind of the international arena. And so I studied it. My major, I couldn't find the word. My major in college was international studies.
Yeah.
And then did that at the Carter Center and then went to law school and thought I would go right back into that field.
Always we think one thing.
Always we think one thing.
Yeah, and then it takes you into another place. And then that took you to NYU. And I know that my guess is, so in college, did you do the whole sorority thing?
I did. I was in a sorority.
Which sorority?
Alpha Delta Pi.
Oh, 80 Pi.
Yep.
I was a Tri-Delt.
Oh, nice.
And so did the friends you make in college, did you just layer those on top of your childhood friends and you've stayed in touch with all those people?
Yeah. Yeah, I have some really good friends from college.
Of those people, how many are still, working? Just straight up working. Not career, not Amy Nelson level working, but just
Probably
working.
half.
Probably half.
Yeah.
And by choice or by circumstance?
People still working, I would say, by choice. The people at home, I don't know. I have lots of thoughts about why people go home. I think some women want to go home, like some men want to go home, and I think that's amazing. I think like on a meta level, corporate America for women is like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it's one thing.
Yeah.
But I think it's like all of the different policies or lack of policies.
Yeah.
And
that support.
Right. It's a ridiculous system.
Yeah.
I mean, I always think like there's a statistic in Lean In that I talk about all the time.
Yeah.
That 43% of highly trained professional women off ramp after they have kids.
Yeah.
And these are women with college and graduate degrees. Like, I don't know many women who paid for law school like I did and are like, I'll do this for 4 or 5 years and then stay home.
And I interview women all the time that say that they would love to come back in, but they may want more of a flex schedule.
Yeah.
Or they may want like, can you find me something that's like 10 to 2 so I can still do pickup? They're trying to balance it. And someone has to crack that code because I haven't found that my clients are open to it.
I think it's so hard. And as a CEO, I think about it all the time too, right? But like, I think it has to change on both sides, right? Like American school schedules are ridiculous because they don't match American work schedules.
Yeah.
So maybe we could try to somehow make those two meet.
A lot of these women I know that have gotten off the kind of corporate America path have now become entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And that's how, well, we can kind of fast forward to that, but I don't want to skip over you going to law school and then becoming a corporate litigator.
Yeah, that part of my life.
That's like a big part of your life.
It was 13 years of my life all in. So I went to law school at NYU, which, for me was like.
So where were you living in New York?
This is incredible. I lived everywhere in New York, but I was a below 14th Street person when I lived in Manhattan.
Me too.
And then I spent a couple of years in Brooklyn too. That was because of a boyfriend.
Not Carl.
No.
We won't talk about
the
that.
pre-Carl era.
Yeah, PC.
But, going to NYU was just this remarkable thing. It was a top 5 law school. And I think when I got in, and then I got a half scholarship there for merit,
amazing.
Which was amazing. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, where I'm a kid from Columbus, Ohio. Like, I'm getting to do these really big things and be in these rooms where I didn't know if I'd ever have access, which is, I think, something we don't talk about enough in this country. And so I loved law school. I'm still paying for it all these years later. But I loved it. It was an incredible experience. And at the end of it, rather than go back into international development, I went to work for a big law firm.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that decision was that I needed to financially. It's interesting. When you go to a lot of law schools, they have a very extensive recruitment center. And actually, before your second year of law school, right? Yeah, before your second year of law school,
right?
Yeah, but the week before law school starts, you go early and you have a week of interviewing where all the law firms come to campus. You interview with dozens of them, you get callbacks, you go interview with the attorneys, and then you spend the summer between your second and third year at one of those law firms for 10 weeks. And I had an interesting experience because I chose a great law firm that I really liked. And then right when I started as a summer associate between my second and third year, the Carter Center called and they said, there was just an election in Ethiopia. It didn't go well. We're going over there to work on, to observe electoral fraud hearings. We'd love for you to come, since I'd had experience working on elections in other countries with the Carter Center. And so I went to my law firm and said, can I
postpone?
No, I was like, should I just leave in the middle of this for a month and go work in Ethiopia? And they said yes, which was incredible.
And you had already accepted the offer?
I was there. Like I was already working there for the summer. And I was like, I'm going to go in 2 weeks for a month, and then I'll come back for the last
really
3
cool.
weeks.
And what was the criterion that you used to select the law firm? Were you looking at?
I'm a huge believer.
Well, me too. But were you looking at that time? Were you aware of kind of your need to see a balance of power and influence among men and women?
No, and I don't think in law firms in America you can ever find that today. I mean,
yeah, but now I think people are. I mean, I think because of the work you're doing and others, people are thinking about these things. I'm thinking about them differently because of you.
I think people are thinking about them. I think it's going to take some time until people are really acting on them. I think so too,
but at least thinking about them is like step one.
It is. It's
right?
an important step.
It's like get to the gym. Like we just need to get through the door,
right,
and then we can figure it out. But at least my awareness has gone up.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think there's a moment. I think we're at a moment in time, which is not a trend, but a societal change.
It feels completely different because having been a woman in a leadership role for so many years, there's been a lot of talk. I've been to a lot of women events. And I think the difference is now, what I feel is that women are kind of advocating for each other more.
I think that's right.
And they're helping each other more.
Yeah.
Where like, I want to help you, not just because I don't want to help you because you're a woman. I want to help you because you're a badass woman.
Well, thanks.
But that's the same thing. Like I don't think any women are looking for handouts. It's
no,
more.
I don't think women ever have. I think like.
But it's just an awareness of like knowing that maybe some women aren't asking. We have to lean in to make it happen, regardless if they're asking for help or not. Just pushing the intros. Women like you and I are good at the networking thing, good at building relationships. And some women have other skills, but they're not necessarily great at putting themselves out there.
I think that's right. And I think something that like it became really clear to me early on as a female founder that the only way I was going to change the system was to get into the system and just do the thing. And so to the extent that I can carry other women with me in that and stand shoulder to shoulder, encourage people to get in the arena to the extent that they can, because it's a privilege to be able to do it.
Yeah.
That's my job. So I went to law school from 2003 to 2006. I worked with a firm in New York from 2006 to 2011 during the financial crisis as a financial services litigator, which was like
fun times.
Fun times. I mean, it was so interesting and amazing, and I got to be in the middle of so much of history, really. But it was also like drinking from a fire hose, which I now know is something that like I just elect to do. Yeah. I can say I don't want to, but it's what I do.
I'm sure you get told to slow down. I do too, and it's like that's just not my comfort.
It's so boring.
Yeah.
So anyway, though, I've also been really involved in politics, and so I was on Obama's National Finance Committee, and I helped start Gen 44, which was the under 40 arm of the DNC. And at a certain point, when I turned around 30, I knew that I wanted to work more in politics. And try to pivot into that maybe more full time. And I didn't see a path to that in New York, especially. And part of that, right, like in a very realistic sense, was the cost of living. I didn't know that I could afford to live in New York, pay out my law school loans, all the things, and not be a full-time corporate litigator,
passionate,
right? Yeah. So all of those things were hard. And I love New York, and I still miss it. There's so much that's great about it. But I thought, if I really want to get more involved in politics, why don't I go back to where I grew up in the Midwest? And I grew up in Ohio, but I spent my summers between the ages of 13 and 20 at this camp in far northern Minnesota, like almost at the border of Canada. And I love Minnesota. It's a progressive, independent state. So I made this big decision to move to Minneapolis, which was scary, but I also always have said to myself, when you make a big decision, there are very few big decisions in life that are one-way doors.
Yeah.
Most of them are two-way doors. Like you can always go back, right? And I was like, if Minnesota doesn't work out, I can always go back to New York. This is how I convince myself to take huge leaps.
I'm the same way. I always keep one foot in. I kept my apartment in New York when I moved here.
Yeah. And I feel like it's like, for me, it's like other than having kids, and that's a terrible thing to say because it makes me sound like marriage isn't permanent, but like other than having kids, truly, there are very few decisions in life that you can't change.
100%.
And so anyway, so I moved to Minneapolis, loved it. Well, I mean, the first few months I was like, what have I done?
Yeah. I was like that for the first year in Seattle.
But then I loved it. And a friend of mine who I went to college with in Atlanta. And this is where I always talk about the power of a network, right? I emailed a friend of mine I'd gone to college with in Atlanta who'd grown up in Minneapolis. He was in the Foreign Service at the time, I think like living in Indonesia. But I emailed him and I was like, hey, I'm moving to Minneapolis. I'd love to meet any of your friends. He introduced me to a friend of his named Molly, who was also a corporate litigator who had moved from New York to Minneapolis, even though she was from Minneapolis. We met. We totally hit it off. And within like an hour of meeting, she was like, you have to meet my older brother's best friend. He's like a brother to me, and you guys are like two peas in a pod. And that's my husband.
Wow.
And it's crazy. And
she just knew.
She just knew. And so, the other thing.
Did you just know?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, when I met him, we talked for 4 hours. He was incredible. I really liked him.
Yeah.
But it was on our second date. And he also, like, after our first date, he like immediately emailed me and was like, I forgot to get your number. I'd like to ask you out again. And I'm like, I'm definitely not in Manhattan anymore.
Yeah.
But so on our second date, we were talking about our parents and our childhoods. And my husband was born in Belgium. His father was in the State Department, but he grew up in Minneapolis. And he said his mom was from Columbus, Ohio. And I was like, that's where I'm from. And we figured out that she was from the same suburb I grew up in. So after the date, I called my mom and asked, oh, do you know so-and-so, my husband's mother's name? And she was like, why are you asking me this? And I said, well, I met her son. And she goes, well, did you meet Carl or Whit? Carl is my husband, Whit's my brother-in-law. And I was like, well, I met Carl. And she was like, you met Carl when you were 3. Like, that's your
Oh my gosh, I
aunt's
have
best
chills.
friend's mom.
I have total chills.
Yeah, it's
Are
crazy.
you kidding
No.
me?
So that's probably why we got married. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
But
you're
no,
like,
I mean,
and mic
but
drop.
so like our third date was at Carl's mom's house, which was
Fast
definitely
forward to-
not
Well, you know
Manhattan.
who you're getting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to, I think we don't talk about this a lot in this day and age, but there's a lot to commonality and shared experience and having that frame of reference. And in a world where we're more and more disconnected, that was incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And so
I knew nobody in common with my husband.
I know, it's hard. And
It
then,
is hard.
6 months after we met, he got a job with Amazon.
6 months after you met. And he's like, let's do this. Rock and roll.
Yeah,
Giddy up.
yeah.
Seattle time.
And I was like,
Were you
okay.
like, where is Seattle? I've seen Grey's Anatomy.
I mean, like I'd been here once, but I was like, wow, okay, that's a big decision because I loved being in Minnesota. I said to myself, will I regret more taking the risk and having it not work out or not taking the risk?
Yeah.
And always when I ask myself that question,
So
the answer
funny.
is I'll regret not
That's
taking the
always
risk.
the question I ask
Yeah.
too.
And so we each sold almost everything we owned and we just drove a car out here. And
And what year was that?
2012.
I mean, can we just take a moment? We don't really have a moment because we're trying to cruise through a podcast, but I feel like it's like a namaste. Like, are you kidding me? 2012 to 2006 years, you've had 3 kids. Are you kidding me? And started the Riveter, which we're going to get to, but that's nuts. You had to just be like, I have to just not try to make this New York, not try to make this Minnesota.
Yeah.
You didn't know people.
No, and it did take me a while to find a community here in Seattle.
But do you have your people?
I
or
do.
your community of like work people?
No, I have my friends too. Like we live in a community in Seattle called West Seattle.
I love
which
West.
is
People
fantastic.
are very deliberate about moving to West Seattle.
Yeah, when we moved here, we knew 3 people who lived in Seattle, and they all
Yeah.
lived in West Seattle.
When you got to Seattle, tell me about that first year
Yeah,
here.
so I transferred with the firm I was with in Minneapolis to their Seattle office, and I stayed there through having my first child.
Mm-hmm.
Sloan is my
Sloan
first
is
child.
the first.
Sloan
I love
is
the
my first.
names.
Thank you.
Which is another conversation. Who came up with the names? They're good names.
I mean, Sloan, I wouldn't say Sloan is named after Sloan Peterson from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's where I know the name from,
Yeah.
of course, right?
Yeah.
And I love 80s movies.
Isn't
and
Shauna the sister?
I think it,
Yeah. She's a dork, though. I don't like that one. I like other
no,
Shaunas.
she's amazing. So yeah, I think a couple of things. I think when I became a mother, I think when I was pregnant, I feel like the perception of me in corporate
Changed.
America changed
Yeah.
like, immediately. Whether that's true or not, that's how I felt.
Yeah. What happened exactly that made you feel that way?
So preface it with saying I worked for an amazing law firm with people I really like and,
No, I
and
get it.
respect. But we were going to trial, right? And there was like, can I go to trial? I'll be 8 months pregnant. And I did, and it was fine. But, there were questions around it, questions around traveling, questions around.
Like, could you win the case with a pregnant woman?
I mean, or just
would you
like,
be out of
can you-
breath?
are you up for it?
Yeah.
I think it's really kind of all of the
Yeah.
like, are you up
Well,
for
8
it?
months pregnant. Yeah, you're swollen. Your breath is.
Yeah,
it's
but
hard
also
to like
I'm
all of it.
I'm always up for it. No, but I mean, it's just like, I don't know. Like, I guess it bothered me because I'm really type A and I didn't want anyone to question my commitment. And also, I think it was more kind of the outside world, right? Like you're just looked at differently. Like I feel like you're looked at as like a vessel and not like a human, not your own person.
No, totally.
So that was part of it. And then the other part of it too, on the flip side, is that when I became a mother, the way I valued my own time changed dramatically. And I liked being a lawyer. I was good at being a lawyer, but I was never in love with it. If there was ever a time I was in love with it, was when I worked in Manhattan during the financial crisis, because it was just fascinating. I was like living in the middle of history.
We're talking like Lehman, Bear. Those were all my clients that all imploded, which was what?
Yeah, that's the world I worked in, right? And it was super crazy. Interesting. Like I was in London in Canary Wharf at a client's office the day Lehman fell across the street, and like watching that, it was like the world changed, right?
100%.
So that was really interesting. But I never, after I left New York, I didn't love it anymore. I think it was really the type of work I was doing in New York too, which was a lot of like government investigations, and that type of work was really interesting to me. And straight litigation was quite different. It was a lot of writing. It was a lot of being alone in a room, and I am 100% extroverted, right? And so anyway, when I became a mom, like how I spent my time changed, how I wanted to spend my time, and I needed to do something I loved. Yeah. Like I was just...
Yeah, you're like, if I'm going to not be with my child, I need to feel like passionate about what I'm doing.
Right, and I knew that I wanted to work. Like I love my children, but I'm not... I need my
your
work.
Own thing.
My work is important to me.
Yeah, and so then walk me through how that led. Were you were in a workspace that didn't feel...
Yeah, so I started thinking about alternatives to lawyering and thought about going out on my own. And I think that's really interesting to note that, like, I think the American narrative is that when women quit corporate America, they go home, but a lot of them are doing other things. A lot of them are starting businesses, perhaps not the venture scale businesses that we think about, but smaller businesses, lifestyle businesses, and
and a lot of
going into their second or third act. Women are actually starting businesses at 5 times the rate of men in America. And so I started thinking about doing that. And so I'm really type A, which is not surprising. So I started going to classes on like how to write a business plan, how to do your financial projections. And those classes were held in co-working spaces. And I was familiar with the idea of co-working. My brother...
That's so funny. I was Googling how to write a business plan. Of course, I'm like, $50 million within 3 years was where I started.
My brother-in-law is a developer and has always worked freelance. And so he's always worked in co-working spaces. So I knew about it. And... I walked into these co-working spaces and I was like, I was really surprised by how masculine they all felt. But it's interesting because, like, if you look at WeWork, Industrious, Knotel, Rocket Space, Convene, Galvanize, they were all founded by men. And so then I thought, well, like, is anyone thinking about women in the design of these spaces? Because, like, I came from Wall Street where it is mostly men. It was built for men, by men, decades and decades ago. But the future of work is being built today, when women make up almost more than half the workforce. So why aren't we driving the design and the thought and the community and the leadership? And so that's really what the Riveter was premised on.
So you had an aha moment.
Yeah.
And then walk me through the timeline between the aha moment and I think I need to incorporate a business.
Yeah. So that was in the summer of 2016. I was on maternity leave.
I still can't, my mouth is on the floor if anybody could see me. I mean, summer 2016 was like a blip. That was 2 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Look what you've done. So the moment is that you...
Yeah, I was on maternity leave with my second daughter, Reese. And that was when all of these ideas kind of percolated. I went back to work after my maternity leave because I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I didn't know, like, what pushes you over the edge? How do you make the decision? Like, my husband and I made a lot of spreadsheets with our financial runway.
So you were going to self-fund it and just kind of figure out...
Yeah, at the time I was going to build one.
Yeah, well, of course. That's how you always think, unless you're...
Some days. But so it was really... But I kind of like kept working on the idea, but didn't pull any triggers. And then the 2016 election happened.
Yeah.
And then I quit my job.
Because you're like, I have to be in the ring.
Right. It was kind of like, if there's ever a time to enter the arena, now would be it. Yeah. And if I'm ever going to try to solve these problems, this is the time to do it. And so that's when I quit my job, gave a lot of notice. So left early January of 2017.
And I remember the first time I heard about the Riveter, a girlfriend invited me to a yoga class.
Oh, cool.
And then I was like, oh, cool. In my mind, it was like, I didn't know really what it was. And then I was introduced to you and we sat down the first time. And you definitely seemed like you were drinking from the fire hose then. I'm sure you'd take that day back anytime now. Because that's like, please. But what role are you playing today as the CEO versus what you were playing when I met you that first 6 months in the business?
I think
Because how many employees do you have now?
26.
You're 26. Okay. And growing.
And growing.
And growing. And now you've had to raise money.
We raised a lot of money.
And how have you gone about that? And has that been, like, break down your time percentage-wise? Recruiting for the Riveter.
It changes a lot. It changes every day. And with like the cycles that we're in. When I have to raise money to grow, that is it's like
Focus.
80% of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I learned pretty early on, and I would give this advice to any entrepreneur who raises money, that when you have to go raise money, you need to make that your almost full-time job. It is really hard to do multiple things when you're raising money, and that's why it's really important to have an amazing team around you. I've also, over the past year and a half, learned to hire for my weaknesses.
Totally.
Right? Like, I know much more now what I'm good at. And what
are you not good at?
So
You're probably like me, I'm going to guess. The details.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really good at building this movement and
being the face and driving.
And driving and aligning us with
and
incredible
leading
people and brands and experiences. I find it very hard to, at the same time, manage a lot of people.
Yeah, you're like, I don't want to be a micromanager. I just want you to do like I would.
Right.
Your expectation is like, I'm not asking you to do something I wouldn't do.
Right.
Yeah. So just step up and ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Right.
Just go.
But that's a mindset, right? That's why we're in the.
What attributes are you looking for a person who fits well at the Riveter?
Yeah. I mean, I would say entrepreneurial mindset.
Totally.
Like, I think, so we're a really early stage, really high growth startup. And that can sound like the most fun thing in the world to a lot of people.
Until they realize, wait, it's 10 at night and I'm working.
Right. The reality of it is very hard. Yeah. And I will say, and I think this is very true, that it is, because the numbers show it. Like, what we're trying to do, we have different walls to scale than men do. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
You don't have the wind at your back in the same way.
We don't. Right.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we have to do it 10 times better.
Yeah.
Which may or may not be true, but that's my feeling.
Well, you know what? If that's what fuels you and drives you, then.
Yeah. Well, you feel like I think as a female founder in the entrepreneurial community, I feel like an outsider in a lot of ways. And
you're not an outsider.
But that drives me, right? Of like, I don't want women in the entrepreneurial community to feel like an outsider.
Yeah.
Like, that's not right.
Yeah.
And so I want to help change that. But I think, like, the cool thing about the Riveter, because we have a very public profile and we have a mission, we are for profit for sure, but we have a mission.
Yeah.
Is that we get a lot of people who want to come join our team.
Because they care about the mission.
They care about the mission, right? Yeah. And I've been able to, like, my leadership team is spectacular. It's 2 women with a lot of experience in building companies, way more experienced in it than I am. And I also, I am not afraid to hire people with a lot more experience than I have, right? I think that's really important.
I mean, I'm perfectly okay being vulnerable and being like, I suck at that.
Yeah.
And so can you go do that?
Yeah.
And then they're psyched because I'm not micromanaging them.
Right.
And I get out of their way to just go do it. So who handles all the programming? You've been able to, I feel like the programming is getting stronger and stronger and shifting. And so now you've got different cities, different locations.
Yeah.
Do you have to pay these people? Are they also part of the vision and the mission?
So we definitely pay speakers when we are putting big events in and branding them ourselves. I think that's important. But we do a lot of programming with people who would like to meet the Riveter members or promote a book or, you know. So there's all sorts of varied levels of it. We have an incredible team that handles our programming. Camilla Whitmore is our national events director. She came to us from SoulCycle.
Yeah.
And then we do a lot in Los Angeles. We have an incredible director of events there named Marta Statmiller, who's done a lot with women's organizations. And then we just kind of lean into the network that we have. We've had speakers from, I think in the past month, we've had like Howard Schultz, Jane Fonda, Tammy Duckworth.
Yeah, amazing ones. Yeah. And so I know that you've had some political guests. How does that play a role within the Riveter?
Yeah.
Does that feel like that can be one and the same, or that it might be polarizing or alienating?
So we have had political guests from different sides of the aisle. It's important to me. We don't support one party or the other at the Riveter. What we support is the idea of equality of opportunity for everyone, regardless of their gender or their race or their social class. And that's important to us. And we will be political about that.
Yeah.
And that means, right, like, we don't believe there should be a gender pay gap.
Yeah.
Right? White women make 78 cents to a man's dollar. Women of color, it is remarkably less.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about equality of opportunity, I don't think that's right.
And what do you have to say? I mean, we can't solve everything.
trying to create a different paradigm for women in corporate America is at the heart of what I believe in and fight for. I mean, from one side, from like the most basic standpoint, like everybody should care about this because
I know, I completely
it's
agree.
the biggest market inefficiency in our entire economy. We grow the economy through population or productivity. When we are losing half of women after they have kids, that is a huge boon to our productivity. So how much stronger could we be as an economy if we all gave a shit about this?
Yes.
Right? And
Yeah.
actually came up with solutions.
Yeah.
On the other hand, and I think this is, being a mother is incredibly important to me. And equality of opportunity begins the day we're born, or it should begin the day we're born, right? And so I'm involved in an organization here in Seattle called West Side Baby.
Oh, we volunteered with them. I love West Side Baby.
Well, and they provide diapers and goods to families in need. And after I had my first daughter, which I found to be very stressful to transition into parenthood, you're like, what am I doing? I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of, and I have a lot of privilege, and there are a lot of families who don't have that privilege. And there's something I didn't know, but you can't buy diapers with federal assistance, with SNAP or WIC. So families who are in need can't use the federal assistance they get to diaper their children. And this leads to a place where babies are getting sick, right? Because they're not being diapered, they're keeping diapers on too long. And it's just ridiculous.
I didn't realize that.
It's just like, it's this ridiculous thing.
These are these basic things.
Right. And that's like a very, and the reason I like West Side Baby is they're tackling a problem that to me seems fixable.
Yeah.
Right? It's a discrete problem. There are a lot of problems that we have to tackle to lead to a place where we have equality of opportunity in America.
Yeah.
But diapering babies is a concrete thing, and it's something I care a lot about.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say is voting rights.
Yeah.
We make it hard to vote in this country.
Yeah.
And I think that...
Well, and that's like a little, it's almost like the fine print.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's incredibly important that we work on voting rights.
Those are big things. And so when you're looking at, like, how can we be helpful as a community in California and in Washington State, where right now you have the Riveter, but as you continue to grow, how can we be helpful besides joining? I'm a member.
Right, yes.
But besides joining, is it thinking of people, thinking of speakers? What is the vetting process like? Is there a vetting process for membership? Meaning that can anybody just be a member, or do you have to make sure that they're people who have the mindset of inclusion?
No, anybody can be a member. We're built on a model of inclusivity.
But what if you get like kind of the like hashtag no assholes? Like what do you do?
We haven't had a problem with it. So, and I like to think that's how it grows, right? People who come to us know who we are and what we stand for. And so we haven't had any sort of a problem with that. I always say it's hard enough to get a seat at the table. We want everybody to come to ours. I think there are a lot of clubs in this world that are based on exclusivity, and I don't know, it wasn't appealing to me.
Yeah. And so now you're growing. So now you've got these 5 locations. How many are you trying to get to?
I mean, there's not an
2019. Is there a
Yeah,
you've got a business plan.
I mean, by the end of 2019, I think we'll have 12 locations.
Holy crapola. Okay, so 12 locations and
then 22 locations by the end of 2020. Let's keep growing. And that might sound like a lot, but WeWork grew really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, WeWork is only 8 years old.
Yep. And so how has the fundraising process been? Did you ever have any weird stories or crazy, like, I cannot believe this just happened to me?
Yeah. I mean, recently I was sitting with a female venture capital investor, and she told me that my strategy for my next capital raise should be to go after VCs that had sexual harassment lawsuits. So I could be their gold star, essentially. And I was like...
to save them?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like...
The poster child?
I mean, that was... And then I told another female VC about the suggestion, and the other female VC was like, that's a great piece of advice. And I'm like, this cannot be the advice we are giving one another, right? Like, I can't, because...
Well, they were just thinking, like, cut through it all. Let's just, like, capitalize on this.
Here's the fastest way to get funding. But the thing is that when you work with investors, you're not just taking their money, you're working
You're
with
being
them,
in business with
right?
them.
You're in business with them.
You're like, I don't really want to be in
shoulder
business.
to shoulder. Right, exactly. I didn't really want to be in business with that. But then the other thing is, like, I've been thinking a lot about this, right? I feel like women, like, tell one another how to survive the system like it is rather than how to change the system.
Yeah.
And I've always been able to find incredible partners to join us in this journey as investors. It's been hard, but and I'd rather take that approach.
Yeah. I think it's really, really smart. And I think it's like, why not be the bar raiser? Why not be the person who's upping the level?
Right. And I think I'm optimistic about most people in the world and that they're good people. And I think the system will change for funding with women. The more women just get funded and the more we do this and go into the system. And so I spend time every week making connections for other female founders. I think it's important to do it. People did it for me.
Yeah, I think it's important also. And so how do you find time for all this? Can you give our listeners and me personally any efficiency hacks, time management hacks? I know that you've described yourself as like an Energizer bunny, and you and I have talked about how I tend to like completely check out and unwind. But what do you do to completely like make this all happen?
So I have lots of help at home. My mother lives with us, which is like the only way any of this works.
Yeah.
And I have full-time.
Let's just pretend that you don't have kids, though. Just what you're doing at work is insane. I mean, that's a whole part of it is your kids, but just all
I
the
delegate.
stuff you're doing.
Like I am not the person who does everything, right?
No,
like I
I'm the same
delegate
way.
as much as I possibly can.
But do you have tools? Do you have actual tools? Like what do you use? Like Outlook?
I have a Google Calendar.
Okay.
We're migrating, I think, soon to Outlook.
Yeah.
We use Slack a lot.
Yeah.
As a team.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge believer in in-person conversations. You can cut through everything as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. So you pick up the phone faster than you're going to have like 20 emails back and forth.
Right. I also I do not write long emails. I don't write introductions. I don't write ends. I just write the middle. I'm like, here's the if I've got just one
Mine's
question.
all in one subject line. People are like, really, Shauna?
Right. And I've told my team, like, I think at the beginning, people are like, is she mad? And I'm like, no, this is just how I write things.
My team is always like, they prep people for like working with me. They're like, don't worry, she's not mad at you if she just writes one sentence. But I'm like, yes, no, on it.
Yeah.
That's all I say.
All right. Because I mean, that's just as fast as you can do. I never try to get to perfect.
Yeah.
I just try to get to good enough and we'll figure out the rest of it on the way.
Yeah. I love it all. Okay. So I know that we're on a time crunch, which is one of your time hacks. Because I'm like,
it is true. Like,
give me an hour. And you're like, how about 45 minutes? I'm like, crap, but I'm a talker. So if Riveters now, let's like fast forward, we've sold the company and we're gajillionaires. What are you doing now? Are you on the beach? Are you 3.0 political Amy?
I mean, I'm never someone who will
Amy
go
for
to
president.
the beach. I mean, I think I think someday.
It's not PTA mom. Like, what are we doing?
I think
3.0?
someday I'd like to run for office.
Yeah.
I mean,
you'd be amazing at it.
I think it'd be so hard. I have such admiration to all of the women out there who are running for office.
How crazy would it be if you were like president and this podcast was like, do you remember the time I interviewed you?
That would be crazy. I don't listen, who knows? I just think I want to do all the good I can.
Okay,
Let's
love
just
it.
put it that way.
So final 2 questions. What are the 3 traits that you want to pass on to Sloan and Merritt and Reese? The 3 traits, well, they don't necessarily all have to be your traits, but I'd like to know your traits that you'd like to pass on.
To be kind, to be hardworking, and to be optimistic.
I love that. And I guess it's going to be 2 more questions. Which one's most likely like you? So
Reese,
far?
my middle daughter.
The middle. Oh, nice. Middle child. Rooting for the middle child. And finally, since this podcast is called What Fuels You? What fuels you?
What fuels me?
Which is like, how do you want to be, like, your legacy?
I mean, it's 2 things. I think it's the belief that I'm an important person and worth a world that looks different, and that my daughters are too.
I love that.
Yeah.
I've gotten chills twice, which is like doesn't happen. That's awesome. Thank you so much. So if anybody has any questions about how to join the Riveter, you can just go on the website, riveter.com.
Yep.
Correct?
Yes.
And
Riveter.co. The Riveter.co. We cannot get the .com.
.co. Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with before we sign off and you go to your next crazy meeting?
Just thank you. It was really great to talk with
so
all of you.
fun,
And Shauna,
right?
thanks for having me on. I love getting to spend time with you.
It's great. I know, me too. Yay.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.